Staff of Hermantown Community Schools, we're about to start our second presentation on policies related to non-discrimination. So we'll have two policies in the 500 series and then one policy in the 800s that we'll refer to toward the end of this presentation. The first policy is Policy 521, Student Disability Non-Discrimination. And this policy really relates to Section 504 or 504 plans. The responsibility of the school district is to identify and evaluate learners who, within the intent of Section 504, need services, accommodations, or programs in order that such learners may receive a free, appropriate public education. So basically, it says, as a district, we recognize 504 plans. And a learner who is protected under Section 504 is one who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more of such person's major life activities, or has a record of such impairment, or is regarded as having such an impairment. And they will qualify for a Section 504 plan, even though they might not necessarily qualify for special education services. And if there are complaints, typically these go through our counselors as we have this set up in our school district. Policy 522, student sex non-discrimination. And what we'll find out here is that this really is in regard to Title IX. It's not entirely about Title IX, but the bulk of this policy relates to Title IX, meaning that boys and girls get same access to both classes, but also activity programs as well. So the district prohibits sexual harassment that occurs within its educational programs and its activities. So we'll scroll down and hit some of the highlighted portions of this policy. So the policy is actually quite long, and that's why we're only going to pick out certain portions of it to go over. So again, it relates to either an educational program, classes, or activities. And it typically is related more to the activities than necessarily our typical educational settings. A formal complaint means a document that is actually filed. It can be both paper and digital. And an informal resolution, and this will come up several times throughout the policy, but the first attempt to solve any complaint is actually done within the district. So if we get a complaint, we can hopefully recognize it if there is an actual action taking place that violates policy, and then find a remedy for that complaint. So again, ideally, we find informal or resolutions that are within the district and alleviate any problems we may be running into. This also relates to the term remedies, which means actions designed to restore or preserve the complainant's equal access to education or activities. Again, we'll scroll down. And the policy is very detailed. So again, we're going to pick out the key points here. The basic requirements for a grievance process. So if somebody is actually filing a complaint, a formal complaint, that there's equitable treatment, and we'll talk about this here in just a little bit. And that equitable treatment means that there's an objective and unbiased evaluation of complaints. So eventually, a complaint might come to any person within the district, a building principal, activities director, a Title IX coordinator, or superintendent. And the district then will have an obligation to create a process that is as unbiased as possible to evaluate the complaint. The complaint is confidential unless the complaint is made in an open public setting. But again, the school district will keep confidential the identity of any individual who has made a report or complaint unless it was made in that public setting. The burden of proof of gathering evidence and following up and conducting an investigation actually lies on the school district, not the party who makes the complaint. Again, a lot of detail in this district, so scrolling down to the next key points. So reporting prohibited conduct. Again, we know that report can really go to anyone that eventually gets to the Title IX coordinator to evaluate and then set up a process. And again, as mentioned before, this is mentioned multiple times throughout the policy. The first attempt will be an informal resolution to a formal complaint, meaning that the district itself, if there is a recognized violation of this policy, that we would try and create a solution within the district, work with the person who's made the complaint, and try and make sure that we are not violating Title IX or this policy in any manner. An investigation of a formal complaint, again, will be set up within the district. The goal is to create an unbiased process, so selecting a person who would conduct a hearing, take evidence from both the district and from the complainant, and then make a determination and share that response. So the person would be referred to as the decision maker and then would provide a written determination regarding the responsibility that applies to the district, to both the complaint, person making the complaint, and then to the district itself. If the district has chosen to take no action or nothing is found by the decision maker, a person filing a complaint still has access to an appeals process, and that appeals process can be done within the district. During this entire process, again, retaliation is prohibited by, especially by the district or any person within the district, for a person making the complaint. There is training that takes place. We have a Title IX coordinator who has access to trainings. Also, our activity director through conferences has access to trainings as well. But coming up toward the end of the policy here, one thing that we'll find out, again, if there is an appeal and that appeal process goes through all of the potential district processes, if a person making a complaint isn't satisfied and feels that there still is a violation, they can go to the Office of Civil Rights in Chicago or the Minnesota Department of Human Rights in St. Paul. Our last policy for non-discrimination policies that must be covered is actually not in the 400 or 500 series. It's in the 800 series, and it relates to crisis management. So this policy really spurs two things. One, you probably see an emergency manual. It's handed out every year, typically updated every year to 2 years, and this is what we use. If there is a crisis situation, especially if we're not remembering exactly what to do off the top of our heads, we have that manual. We can open up to the page that relates to the scenario that's taking place and find some guidance. The second thing that comes from the crisis management policy is the crisis team itself. So this is typically the counselors, the principals, several other people related, and this is a team that gets together, has a manual itself, and tries to help guide the district or guide individuals through tragic scenarios. And we typically see that related to, you might see the email that says sad news. The crisis team is working behind the scenes to try and help as many people as possible. So those are two things that really come from Policy 806. But the reason that this also qualifies as a policy that must be discussed during non-discrimination discussions is that we have a general crisis procedure. We talk about lockdowns, evacuation procedures, sheltering procedures, crisis specific, school emergency response teams. But part of this policy must include, how do we help students who have disabilities in these crisis situations? And that's why it fits into the non-discrimination discussion. So for example, in any of the schools, especially the middle school, high school, where you have 2 floors, the second floor will find evac chairs for helping students who might have disabilities get downstairs during a crisis scenario. So that's the purpose of including Policy 806 in this discussion. And as we get to the bottom of it, this concludes the discussion on non-discrimination policies that are required for all staff members of Hermantown Community Schools.